Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 165 for August 11th, 2011. I'm Ryan Schrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Al Malventano.
And I'm sure every one of you absolutely missed us last week. You didn't get to hear from me or Josh or Jeremy or Alan or anybody like that, unless, of course, you went to QuakeCon and then you got to see all of us in person. And what a treat that must have been for all of you, I'm sure. So we have quite a bit of news and information and reviews to get through, actually, because we did not have a podcast last week. We'll try to get to some of the majority of it, the best of the best, if you will. Quick informational notes, pcper.com/podcast, URL that you need to share with all of your friends about this show. We really want you to encourage you to do that. Podcast@pcper.com is the email address. We're not going to include any emails today, again, because we have so much stuff to cover over this 2-week span. And then, of course, we have the ever-present, sometimes used telephone line of 1-888-38-PC-PER, toll-free in the U.S. and Canada. Also, if you were once a follower and then are no longer of twitter.com/PCPER, you should know that Twitter account has been reactivated, reassociated with our RSS feed, so you could follow that to get the latest up-to-date news posts and reviews posts from all of us and others at PC Perspective. So, what do you say we jump in here and talk a little bit, maybe even a post-mortem, if you will, about the QuakeCon convention that happened last weekend in Dallas, Texas. I believe the official dates were August 4th to the 7th, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore because you weren't there, probably. Some of you were. There were definitely a lot of podcast listeners there at the event. I know because a lot of them came up to me and said, shook my hand and say, hey, thanks, I love the podcast. It was a lot of fun meeting a lot of new people. And it's, I think, for all of us that were there, kind of a humbling thing that there are people that actually do listen to this show, pay attention to what we say, and Lord help them sometimes take our advice. So I guess before we get into like individual news items from the show and that type of thing, I just wanted to kind of go around. I know, Jeremy, you couldn't make it, but Josh and Alan, what were your overall thoughts and impressions of the weekend, of the workshop? Anything kind of stand out to you guys?
The keynote, of course, was interesting. John Carmack is a rather dense talking individual, so it was kind of hard to pick up on some of the stuff he was talking about, but he talked about a lot of stuff for a very long time. I was kind of disappointed by the vendors show up and SIA amount of people who had booths there. The year before we had like Patriot and Asus had a big one, and they had lots of screens up and lots of computers and showing off products and had a little bit more folks there that were active in the workshop. I'm not sure what all went on in the background. I talked to a couple of people who had had some space the year before, and they didn't really want to talk about things. They just kind of said the QuakeCon people were not as accommodating this year as they were before. But they had 5 times the amount of bandwidth to the BYOC. There was nobody complaining about not being able to connect to StarCraft or World of Warcraft or setting up Minecraft servers or anything.
Nope.
Weren't you testing out and you saw something like 60 megabit down on an individual computer?
Nice.
So we tested the bandwidth because we were using it to stream live our workshop event. We wanted to get an idea how much bandwidth we had, and I believe the Friday of the event, I saw a speed test that was 60 megabits down and like 40 megabits up or 30 megabits up or something like that. And that was consistent throughout the entirety of the weekend. Saturday it was like that as well because we did a double check again with those types of speeds. So they definitely didn't have any issues. They brought in AT&T as their sponsor for that. And that was a huge deal last year. Anybody that was there even remembers, hearing about it, that it was almost a disaster because nobody could get online, and a lot of the games people wanted to play, StarCraft, Quake Live, even for those types of things, required remote server authentication if they didn't have local hardware there in the BYOC. So they definitely stepped up their game in the regards to bandwidth. As far as the vendors go, I agree with you 100%, Josh. It was a disappointment to see some of the basically almost all of the major names in the world of PC hardware not with a booth, right? So NVIDIA was there. They were one of the sponsors. They donated a lot of stuff in terms of hardware for gaming systems and for raffles and that kind of stuff, in addition to our own workshop, right? But they didn't have a booth. They didn't have booth space. AMD didn't have booth presence. Intel didn't have booth presence. ASUS, Gigabyte, MSI, these types of these companies that are really kind of staples in terms of hardware, right? All I can say is I think it's a transition from a corporate standpoint at QuakeCon, that this is less about like PC gaming hardware and more about gaming software, because they had consoles there, they had PCs there, they were demoing Rage on both and everything. It was a cool configuration in that way. I hope to see a reversion to for 2012's iteration of QuakeCon, that we see more PC vendors there, that we see NVIDIA and AMD want to get more involved. We're not the only ones who have expressed concern to the QuakeCon staff about that, and I think they kind of heard that side of things, right? They took heed to all the complaints they had last year about bandwidth and connectivity, and they quadrupled their efforts in that regard and took care of business there. So maybe they'll be able to do that for this other complaint we've had this year as well. So it was still pretty cool. What about you, Alan? Anything in particular kind of stick out?
Let's see. Hardware Workshop fans definitely like T-shirts.
Oh boy, do they!
Yeah, and boy, there were not that many T-shirts being given out this year.
Yeah, so that's also kudos to NVIDIA, because we brought a huge, 4 or 5 huge boxes worth of shirts.
We brought 400 shirts, and I think they brought about 600 shirts.
Right, yeah, NVIDIA shows up and they roll with a whole cart full of NVIDIA shirts, and we had some Corsair ones come in and other stuff. So we just we were spending pretty much the whole time just throwing shirts at the crowd. I think basically everybody walked out with at least one shirt, which was cool.
It should have been, yeah.
Yeah. And the build was pretty cool. The build competition thing.
The system build competition. Yeah.
Yep. So we had.
I think that turned out better than I thought.
Yeah, it did. We had two systems worth of hardware just sitting side by side, and everybody had to. We picked some people just based on what the raffle tickets for that one too, right?
Yep.
And we just picked a couple names, and they did their build, and whoever won that. Whoever booted up first, they kept that system, which was pretty cool. And then what did the other one go to?
So the other one, we did a 3D Mark 11 contest. So we built the first system, and then the idea was to run 3D Mark 11 live on stage, and we had everybody else in attendance write down a guess of what score they thought the system was going to get, and whoever was closest got the other system. Well, we had a little bit of a snafu in that we forgot that the free non-registered version of 3D Mark 11 that we had installed requires a connection to the internet to run the first time. So luckily we had a backup score. We had already had the hardware up and running here locally at my office, obviously to make sure it all ran and all that kind of stuff. So we had a number, and we did end up getting results. So the person that guessed it, I think the winning score was 6880, and I think the winning guess was like 6893. Yeah, it was something like that. It was pretty close.
So the other thing that stands out in my mind that really stood out, unfortunately, was not the winner of the case mod contest, but I feel that they deserve a mention here. So if you're looking along on the website, it's the day 2 coverage, the second page in, right in the middle. There was a submersion liquid-cooled case.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet.
Okay, so that by itself, that's pretty high-end, out there kind of a mod, kind of a case mod. However, this one took it to a completely different level, because anything else submersion cooled is like either oil, some other kind of non-conductive / insulative, kind of liquid.
Right.
The really crazy people that tend to do this in the past have done this thing called 3M makes this floor inert liquid, which is basically just it's a liquid, it's non-conductive, it's something that you can surround PC components with, and it won't mess everything up. So you can have the items liquid
and
cooled.
You can super oxygenate it and breathe it.
Well, yeah. Okay, so floor inert, the idea with floor inert is it's just a liquid. right? So the heat transfer just goes into the liquid warms up a little bit, and then it has to have some kind of a heat exchanger to cool it back down. This is a completely different animal. I mean, completely. There's a newer method or a newer kind of cooling medium made by 3M now. I forget the exact name of it, but this stuff has a just above room temperature boiling point. So the idea is you have a typical submerged kind of system where this system looks like it's in a little mini fish tank kind of deal, but this time the components have the water or the liquid boiling directly off of them, which makes for like a million times cooler looking case.
It does look much better, yeah.
Yeah, because you have the CPU and the GPU just sitting there bare, no heatsink, and the stuff is just boiling off of them. It's like
Did you
you're
get
looking
any video
at a pot.
of that?
Yeah, I got some.
Why didn't you
It
do
didn't
that
come
to
out
me?
that it didn't come out that good because it was so dark in there. It was hard to get some kind of any kind of decent video. I should have just grabbed the light panel or something and tried to take something then. But it was just really, really cool looking to see in person.
Yep.
And here's the thing: since it's doing phase change, and it's basically if you convert from a liquid to a gas, that pulls an insane amount more heat compared to just making a liquid a little bit hotter and then having to cool it off, right? Because it's a phase change. It's
phase change cooling, right?
Yeah, so
Dun,
that's what it was.
dun,
It was
dun.
phase change cooling right there at the CPU and the GPU, and not only that, everything else on the motherboard. So it was actually really cool from the standpoint of you can tell what parts of the motherboard were making heat, right? So you'd have like some little other chips on the motherboard, and there'd be like a little stream of bubbles coming off of that, and you can tell, okay, that guy's actually making heat. And this was a motherboard, like a Zotac motherboard. It had like built-in Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi module was actually submerged and actually had like some little stream of bubbles coming out of that, and it still worked because he wired the antennas away from the modules and sticking out the top. So it actually had working Wi-Fi and everything else. It was pretty crazy, and definitely worth a mention. And I think he's trying to, this guy is just pouring like the last year of his life into that thing. He's trying to make it something that eventually people can buy and use in some form of a home system. I wouldn't mind having that sucker just sitting on a wall.
Yeah, it definitely looked cool. I could totally see that being a feasible business option there too. Yeah. Let's see, what else was there? Oh, there was a 20 years of id Software panel hosted by my wife's little brother's heartthrob Morgan Webb. Where they went through and kind of talked about the original days of QuakeCon, the original days at id, how some of the people joined up, some of the cool stories from it. That was a pretty interesting panel to sit on. If you go to our QuakeCon Day 2 coverage, which is linked in our show notes here, or you can just go to the website and search for it, we have the full video of the hour-long panel there. They showed Skyrim off some more, and it looked pretty badass.
Rage actually looks fun.
Rage does look very good, actually.
It's not just a dark corridor shooter with imps coming out of closets within closets.
Right, double closets. Those are the worst.
You can't be serious.
What
I know.
the
They're taking a big step away from typical ID shooters, id shooters, rather.
And there wasn't that a part of Rage? That was the driving, the multiplayer driving thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that was just fun to watch. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how fun it would be playing.
Except that one guy who really sucked.
Yeah. Everybody else was good though.
Everybody else. So we got to see some of that. There's some Skyrim. They didn't let cameras in. They didn't let people take photos or videos during the Skyrim presentation. Was kind of disappointing. And then our Day 3 coverage, we look at the case mods from our workshop. I have a lot of fun doing the workshop. This time it was a little bit less stressful. Being the third year we've done it, I know pretty much what to expect. We got done early. We didn't get yelled at by any executives, so that's always a good thing. Again, just it was really awesome to have everybody come up and want to say hi and meet us, and it made holding the events kind of worthwhile, right? Because we personally as a company spend a lot of money putting that on, even though all the prizes are donated. Corsair, NVIDIA, OCZ, everybody, MSI, ASUS, all these guys that donate prizes, they all do that completely free for everybody, but we spend a lot of money, bringing all the guys down here, making sure we have hotel rooms to sleep in and food to eat. We spend a lot of money on those T-shirts and shipping bills and all this other kind of stuff. It was really cool. We spent a lot of money on it, but it always I always worry about if this is a good investment. And usually it's after the workshop when everybody comes over and says, thanks, hey, really had fun. I won this, or even if, hey, I didn't win anything, but it was really awesome seeing you give out all that much stuff. We had between 1,100 and 1,200 people there, according to what the QuakeCon guy said, because the room was basically full. People were standing, which was awesome. So
and that was
a
2-hour block, right, Ryan?
Yeah, we had it from 3:30 to 5:30, and one of my favorite parts is going out before we started letting people in and walking down the line and seeing how long the line went through the hotel, people waiting to get in, which was really cool. A lot of people yelling at us and that kind of stuff, and of course yelling for T-shirts, as Alan alluded to earlier. So it was a lot of fun.
That, and we spent that entire 2-hour block. It was right up until the end. We were doing nothing. Ryan was doing nothing but grabbing raffle tickets out of a bag and calling numbers, and it was just a continuous stream of giving stuff away for 2 solid hours. That was insane.
We had about $33,000 of giveaways, I believe, and we donated $6,000, $7,000 worth of stuff to the volunteers at QuakeCon, those guys that work for free to man doors and organize things and help people and do security and all those types of things. So I think the QuakeCon staff likes having us there. We bring a lot to the table in terms of giving back to this community. We really love doing it. There's a possibility now of us doing these types of events at other venues, like maybe PAX or BlizzCon and E3 and those types of things as well. So we're going to keep our ears and eyes open for those types of things. So if you did come out, I hope you had fun. Send us a note on Twitter or email or Google Plus or wherever it is you can find us, and let us know what you thought, what you think maybe we could do better, what you want to see more of. We did have recommendations from several people about, hey, let's do like a live podcast recording on Friday night or Friday, and then the workshop on Saturday, because some people wanted to see more kind of like editorial content at the workshop as opposed to wall-to-wall giving away stuff. They still want the free stuff, but they might also want a little bit of opinion and thought involved in things too. So,
because I'm always willing to give my opinion. Just hand me the microphone.
Yeah, okay, all right, fair enough.
I can be like 1/10 of John Carmack with how long I can speak, but it's pretty damn up there.
So that's an hour.
But you don't say nearly as interesting things, Josh.
Well, it depends on how many beers I've
Fair enough.
consumed.
Let's take a quick ad break here. Thank today's podcast sponsor, and then we will jump back into some reviews and news. All right, thank you, MSI, for that. Now, actually, we are going to discuss an MSI product from Josh. We didn't talk about this yet because we didn't have a podcast act, right?
Yep. We skipped on the podcast when I published this.
All right, well, let's talk about 580 GTX Lightning Extreme Edition, which is both Lightning and Extreme, so should be double better than everything else.
Exactly. It's a multiplicative. In fact, dare I say logarithmic in how awesome this card is when you add the two together. Yeah, MSI has had a nice stream of products bearing the Lightning name tag. I think the first one that came out was, I believe it was a GTX 270 Lightning, and they had a cheaper version of GTX 260 Lightning, and they were slightly better in terms of cooling, a little bit better overclocking. And the next year they came out with some more Lightning products based on the AMD HD 5900 series. Those didn't go over so well. The design was interesting, had a lot of nice components to it. The cooling was great, but they didn't overclock worth beans. And so often people with reference designs were seeing much higher overclocks than those with this specialized Lightning design. Well, they went back to the drawing board. They had a GTX 480 based board that just wiped the floor with the competition. Earlier this year, they had the HD 6970, which I reviewed. They call it the R6970 Lightning. And then they came out with a GTX 580 based one called the N580 GTX Lightning. Well, this one is the Extreme Edition. And not only does it have all the things that the Lightning does, namely the improved cooling due to having two big fans in there and a huge amount of just square footage of aluminum fins and copper heat pipes. the custom PCB
Super pipes.
design. Super pipes. There's 2 super pipes on this. So, custom PCB design. They had quality components in there. Protolith chips. They've got something like, I think it's 20. It's 16 power phases, and those are split up in between the memory and the GPU, and then the kind of the PCI Express controller on board. And this is like double the amount of a reference design. I'll show you the card here. It's a monstrous thing. It's
pretty big.
larger than my head, which
It's hard to do.
isn't so hard to do. I look like the damn guy from Watchmen, but that's a different story altogether.
The owl.
So yeah, it's a large card. It's not as large as the HD 6970 version, which is about another half-inch longer. And that's mainly because where they put the cooling at, and they used a lot of common components between the two. But this does have some significant differences. First off, it's a 3 gigabyte card. It's not the 1.5 gigabyte that the standard GTX 580 is. They've doubled the amount of memory on board, so it should handle higher resolutions and just be a little bit better in terms of that. The second thing is, I'm trying to think of all of them, is obviously the blue fans.
Yes.
These things are thermally, what would you call it, reactive to temperature. So at 45 degrees Celsius, they turn white. So if your case is getting really hot, you can look in there and you see these things spinning, and they just plain turn white. And what was the last third thing? There was just one other. I'm trying to remember that was slightly different.
Was that the fan that spins the opposite direction when you first turn it on?
Exactly. The first 30 seconds of operation, the fans spin backwards. So it's actually pulling air in from behind and sucking it out. Now, the thought behind this is that 30 seconds, it removes a pretty decent amount of dust that may have built up on not only the fans, but on the fins of the heatsink. And so this is a very, very simple idea that nobody has really implemented yet, and MSI has done that. And, I'm sure we can, look around and do some perhaps long-term studies and see if it in fact does do anything. But again, it's a simple idea that nobody has implemented, and they have. And when you think about it, it should just work. I mean, it's not going to be perfect, but it's certainly better than what we have seen so far. The card is overclocked out of the box. I believe it goes around 770 or what is the stock clock of? It's 770 as a stock. So this is 830 megahertz. Yeah. So it's a pretty good chunk of overclocking. I was able to take this to about 930 megahertz, and it made it, this is a pretty fast card. I didn't have the ability to liquid cool it or to use liquid nitrogen. People have been seeing overclocks of the 1 gigahertz, slightly above 1 gigahertz plus. And this is a card that is certainly breaking records in 3D Mark and 09, Vantage and 11.
And you can disable the cold bug on it, can't you?
Yeah, and you can do that. If you look on the back here, we have a series. I know it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a switch right here. You turn to do it the alternate BIOS, which disables the thermal sensor on the chip. Now, what happens is that when this chip gets extremely cold, it kind of trips that thermal sensor, and it freaks everything out, and it'll just shut down the card. This cuts out that thermal probe so that you can actually cool this, below 40 degrees Celsius. And, liquid nitrogen is real damn cold. So it kind of works around that bug. You also have a couple other dip switches on the back that control the amount of voltage that goes into the GPU and the memory. And it's just a way to kind of do that without going and using the MSI Afterburner software, which all of those properties except the cold bug it can be adjusted using the Afterburner product. So adjusting voltage on the GPU, memory, and the PCI Express controller. You can do those things to get a little bit more of a stable overclock. Also, other things like it's got the phase arrays. I mean, there's a bunch of LEDs back here you can barely see. Those light up depending on how many phases are actually working, and that automatically adjusts depending on load. You got a full game going, everything's going. If you're watching a video, it's like 1/4 of them are being used. So it's a pretty efficient card. It pulls less power than the previous generation GTX 480 at both idle and load, and sometimes it's a pretty significant difference. It's just a really fast, good card, and the only problem with it is that it is going to be about $100 to $120 more expensive than a standard one. Now, what you get, of course, is the unique features of that, the thermal die fans, and double the amount of memory. I think it's Zotac that has a 3 gig card, and their price is not that much farther away than this one.
Right.
And so this is, it's something that's not for everybody. It's definitely for the enthusiast who has the money to spend. It performs very well. It's the fastest single GPU card really out there. There may be a couple other models that have a slightly faster stock clock, overclock out of the box. But where you can take this one, I think it far outstrips any other product that's out in the market. Now, the only thing that really is better than this card.
Yeah. Waiting.
Is 2 of them.
It's 2 of them. What do you do with 2 of them?
Yeah. So if you want the fastest dual GPU setup, this is it. And this is also right now currently the most expensive dual card with 2 GPUs total system out there. And there's nothing really from AMD that compares. If you consider an HD 6970, even one of the top ones is going to be $370. 2 of them is $740. How's that for mathematics? And you've got one of these cards that's sitting around the $600 mark. 2 of them at $1,200. So it's not until you kind of start looking at the GTX 590s and the HD 6990s and those in dual configurations, which, as far as I'm concerned, just kind of defeats the purpose because they don't work that well in quad. But these are really going to be, they should be good, and not only just high resolution, namely 2560 by 1600, but where this is really aimed at is the triple monitor. The 5870 or whatever by
760 by 1200 or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers, but when you're using 3 monitors in the widescreen resolution, these things should do very well because they've got the expanded frame buffer in there, they're just really damn fast cards. So in the next couple of weeks, we should see the results of this. And I think we're only like the second website in the world that has been allowed to do 2 of these cards, the other being Hard OCP.
Cool. Well, we will await those further results. And I guess if you want to know other stuff like the power consumption, those types of things, check out the full review, obviously, at PCPer.com. A couple of other quick items I will throw your way. We're not going to talk about them in detail. One is a Antec High Current Gamer 750-watt power supply. Lee Garbett, our PSU guru, did a really good job on this. This is a pretty good power supply, I think, for people who are looking for a high-quality unit, but it's still modestly priced. This will sell for around $100 US, which is pretty good for a 750-watt model. And in fact, if we look at the conclusion area of this, Lee really, really likes it a lot. It does have a 750 watts of continuous output on it, which is pretty good. It's clean DC outputs, good efficiency, has support for quad, or it has 12 It has quad 12-volt outputs, so each rated at 40 amps, SLI and Crossfire ready and certified, of course. It does have 4 PCIe connectors for multiple graphics card support. So you won't be able to do 4 cards or 3 cards necessarily, but you can do 2 dual power connector cards on that one. So if you're if you're looking for a new power supply, take a look at that review as well, also on the website. And also, Steve posted a review of the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 Android tablet today. So if you are curious about that device and you haven't seen a review on it yet, that is also on the PC Perspective homepage today. Steve also did like it a lot. There were a couple of issues with it here and there, but I still think there's tight competition. Ken and I were talking earlier. I still think this will probably be known as the best Android tablet currently available. We're talking about the Asus Transformer review coming up, and we've already taken a look at the Motorola Zoom. But that with a 4G upgrade might be pretty competitive. So that's kind of our article summation for the last 2 weeks. Now we're going to touch on some news items that we have missed in the last 14 days as well. One of the interesting items that if you were at the workshop or watched the workshop live or have watched the replay. Oh, by the way, before I go any further, I forgot to mention in our QuakeCon discussion, if you missed the workshop and you want to watch and see what all went on, if you go to pcper.com/workshop, you'll see we have a YouTube video replay of the whole 95-minute endeavor if you wish to sit through it. And also, we do look, even if you don't want to watch the whole thing, go check out the case mods. They're the first section, the custom-built cases, where we talked about the fluid-based one that Alan was very attached to, and then there's the other one that actually ended up winning was this enormous blue behemoth of a system, which was also very, very cool looking. Check those out. Those are early in the video, and I'd like to see if you guys have any feedback as well. Next year, we also want to try to get live visitors involved in prize offerings too. So anyway, but one of the things we did show off there that was actually included in the system build contest were PNY Accelerate Liquid Cooled GTX 580s. And if you look, we had a just delivered post at PCPer.com about it. And this is basically a overclocked GTX 580 graphics card that is water cooled and also comes with a CPU water block. So you can think of this as the very popular self-contained all-in-one CPU water coolers that exist from Corsair and Acetec and Coolit and all these other types of guys. This takes that same technology, that same idea, and integrates a GPU into the mix as well. So here we got a PNY Accelerate GTX 580, and there's a water block. What's interesting is that if you look at the outside of the GTX 580, it looks pretty much identical to any normal GTX 580, except there's 2 tubes coming out at the top of it. And obviously when you take the sheath off, you'll see underneath the Acetec water block, and then there's still a fan on there, and that's actually running at a very, very low RPM. It's used to cool the memory and just provide a little airflow out of the system. So it does use the same type of configuration there. These are really, really cool units. This GTX 580, I think, let's see, where's my pricing listed here? $650 or so for this water-cooled version, and keep in mind that also includes the cooler for your processor. So that's maybe $160 more than a regular kind of an air-cooled, overclocked GTX 580. And then you take into account that this is water-cooled. It's going to run a little quieter, maybe a little bit more efficiently as well, and you get a CPU cooler out of it as well. Something to keep your eye out for. We gave the first 2 production units, period. The first 2 that came off these are all kind of like hand assembled at the end of the run type of thing. Those were shipped to us in this kind of weird egg crate contraption that if you watch the workshop video, you'll see as well. And those were given to the people who won, they were in the system build contest there. So one person won one by building it, one person won it by guessing its performance pretty well. There was also another one coming out from Zotac. I don't have any hands-on time with that one yet, but this one's kind of interesting because it's a single slot design. Similar idea, self-contained, all-in-one water cooling. Does not include a CPU cooler, though. This is the GPU portion only. And also kind of interesting, you can buy the upgrade kit. So if you have a stock kind of reference PCB-based GTX 580, you'd be able to buy the cooler for it and upgrade to water cooling in that way as well. So that's kind of interesting. So hopefully we'll get some of those hands-on as well. Other interesting news. Actually, let's move this Intel Ultrabook discussion away for a little bit, and we're going to change the order here. Who, if anyone, read Scott's article that looked at the cost of consoles, and I guess this from a power perspective? Jeremy, did you give this a look? And I know there was a lot of comments.
Well, it wasn't so much power; it was how much you end up spending on games.
Okay.
So one of the key arguments that he starts out with is the fact that one of the reasons that when you're buying a console game, it tends to cost about $10 more than the PC equivalent is because you're forking over $10 to whichever company it is that you're using the console of, essentially as a license to be able to play it. So, already, if it's Xbox, Microsoft's making it off of you. If you got the PlayStation, it's Nintendo. So they're getting $10 for every single one of those. Xbox Live is another perfect example where you're paying to play. $60 a year, apparently, just to be able to play Xbox Live games.
Right.
Which, it's the Warcraft model of doing business, but without the Warcraft. So his basic argument is that adding up over 4 years of his general usage with Xbox Live, he could have bought himself a Radeon HD 6950 bundled with Dirt 3. So now he's got a video game in perpetuity that he never has to pay for to be able to play again because he's already bought it. And he's got a half-decent video card that is either going to get slapped in with an additional pre-existing video card or be an upgrade. And so he's left with, something of actual value versus the consoles where, not only did you pay extra for it in the first place, you now have to pay the company for the privilege of playing it. It's an interesting way to look at it. And the other thing that he points out is that originally the argument comes, I can buy my console for cheap. In fact, I can buy my console essentially at cheaper than what it made the company to make it because, PlayStation was taking a $300 or so loss per unit for years.
Sure.
In the knowledge that they were eventually going to make it back because, hey, everyone's giving them an extra $10 and, they're paying for this and they're paying for that. So, hey, it's cheaper to get the console. Well, yeah, if you want to win benchmarking competitions. But seriously, if you're going to play basic games for the same price that you paid for that first-gen console, you're going to have something that can still play stuff nowadays and do a significant amount more than that console did. And you'll have a brand new 6950 popped in it because of the money that you saved.
Fair enough.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Cool. What's interesting about this little piece here is it comments and kind of debate going in there, which is, I guess, traditionally what happens when we have the PC versus console argument, which I know Jeremy is a big proponent of that discussion. I won't call it an argument, we'll call it a discussion. So
that might be a little biased, yeah.
You might be a little bit biased. So it's a very interesting read. I highly encourage everybody to go check that out. And then when we get up to 30-something comments in here, a lot of back and forth here, and not just stupid comments like First or Simpsons did it, stuff like that. So
my quick comment on that is just, gaming consoles are nice and everything, but PCs are just more versatile overall. You can do a heck of a lot other stuff with them on top of,
Yes.
You don't do so much with an Xbox or a PS3, right?
Yep. Damn it. Carmack wants control of the platform so damn close to the metal that he doesn't have any of the driver overhead that the PCs have.
That's very
Microsoft's
interesting.
not giving that to him.
That was true. He was saying that, but at the same time, he was also saying that he would like to be able to use all the extra capacity, all those other things that you get on PC that you don't get in the consoles, right? That he was just like, well, I had to make these games, but I sort of, held himself back because he was trying to go for all three with the same data set, the same, texture map, the same thing, same level of textures, all that other stuff. So, yeah, if you think about it, he a game developer, if they're going straight for PC, can actually push it harder because PCs now have more available to them. More RAM.
Well, it's an interesting. I don't want to get too much into that because Ken's in the other room right now, kind of editing that interview we did with John Carmack, and he does go into that. And I think it'll be a really interesting debate for us next week on the podcast. Hopefully, it'll be by next week. It definitely will, where we can talk about his thoughts on you get better access to hardware on a console, and even though the PC might be an order of magnitude faster, it's much more difficult to get to all that power. But we'll hold off on that. But I know Josh and all of us have some pretty good opinions on that too. So tease for next week. Make sure you tune in next week.
Or maybe
something
a
else
bad opinion.
What's
like
that?
Selling bad opinions.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Intel 7D SSD prices are leaked. Alan, tell us why this is probably not good news.
710 series. Okay, so I forget what the roadmap looked exactly like, but I could have sworn that the 700 series drives were supposed to be a 6 gigabit serial ATA. And they were also supposed to be enterprise class. So, yes, they're enterprise class. They're using the enterprise grade MLC, which is just really, really high quality MLC flash. I'm guessing, cherry hand-picked, whatever you want to call it. The best possible binning of their flash memory, probably with a little bit of an extra margin thrown in on the production.
And the case is made of solid gold, correct?
It must be, because a 100 gigabyte drive is $650. So
Holy crap.
Here's what's funny about this. Look,
I'm not laughing. Are you kidding me?
No. We all took this huge gasp, right, when we saw this piece. Okay, so 100 gig, $650. 200 gig, $1,250. $1,900 for a 300 gig model, right? And it's not even serial ATA 6 gigabit. It's only 3 gigabit. So I'm guessing it uses just, I don't know, maybe slight tweaks to the existing controller that we just reviewed.
Nice.
What, the 310?
The 320 was 320. The 320, not the 310. So it's probably the same kind of thing. It's probably, well, it's almost definitely synchronous as far as, the using the better, higher speed protocol and everything, but it's still bottlenecked by the interface, right? So these drives are only going to go so fast because you're limited. Serial ATA 3 gigabit. You're only going to get so much out of them. So here's what is kind of funny about this. I was just all like, wow, that's just so expensive. But I myself, a little over 2 years back now, spent $650 on an 80 gigabyte X25M, which was only meant to be consumer grade, right? So this is, it's very expensive. It's crazy cost per gig by today's standards.
Dude, in 1973, I spent $10,000 on a 5 megabyte drive. I think that's bad.
And it was bigger than his head.
Yes. Damn.
So,
big.
okay. So very expensive. And I seriously doubt that street price on those, if it is such a thing that actually gets like a street price, because this might be such an out there enterprise tailored kind of thing. It'll be like the X25Es, right?
Right.
Not many people had those drives. They just got the M because the M was good, right? This is probably going to be the same kind of thing. Instead of this, people are just going to buy a 320, right? This is the thing that the enterprise, the guys that just, they want the super crazy high quality, no matter what, we got budget to burn kind of thing. That's probably what they're going to do and get these instead of the 320s. Because the 320s are enterprise rated, right? They do have ratings in their spec sheets for enterprise use.
Sure.
The thing that sort of caught our eye on this as well was that the warranty is only listed as 3 year. Now the 320 series came out with a 3-year warranty, which we suspected that the drop to 3 years had something to do with maybe 25 nanometer and, less longevity, that kind of thing. But until shortly after those drives came out, they just grandfathered and upped the warranty to 5. So anybody that had bought it before, you were good, you covered 5-year warranty. Even if you're using it in enterprise capacity, right, it was just, the only limit was that if you hit the little, you have written more than X amount of data to the drive, the little switch in the smart data, if that gets flipped because you've just burned it out from writing just too much to it over time, your warranty's out, right? So they said the same thing for this, but for some reason it's a 3-year warranty. I'm guessing the leaked data that whoever it was got. Who knows how old it is, right? If that leaked data came from somewhere around the time before they switched the warranty from 3 to 5 on the 320, that's probably why it's 3. So I think Intel would be sort of dinging themselves if they released such an expensive drive with a warranty 2 years shy of the much cheaper consumer grade product rated for the same amount of writing. Right? That would be kind of like, then you'd really be, why bother, right? So who's to say? It's a leak. It's not final by any means. One thing I did notice is the write speeds. It looks like it's the same rating across the board. So even the 100 gigabyte model would, in theory, have 210 meg per second writes. So they're not doing their little step increase thing like they did with the 320 series.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we just got to see what comes about. I'm really hoping that Intel will finally, at some point, come out with their 6 gigabyte per second version of that 10-channel controller, like that's in the 320, and like what was in the X25M, because that thing will be a beast at 6 gigabyte per second.
Cool. Let's see what we got next up on our list. Express Card trying to pull a not so fast one. This kind of is a story we see, I don't know, it seems almost quarterly now. Here's somebody who's going to offer an external graphics card for a notebook solution. Jeremy, I sent you some information or a link to something about a company called, I think we mentioned it previously, Village Instruments, because I believe somebody made a comment that it sounded like Village Idiots. Maybe they should have picked a different name.
I'm not going to argue their choice.
Talking about the external graphics cards, what did you learn kind of about these technologies while you were looking up, researching for this news post?
Yeah. Well, I mean, essentially you'd mentioned that, hey, they've got a 3rd generation out and you were going to try one. And the basic idea is great. It is essentially the equivalent of an external hard drive case for a graphics card. You pick up whatever PCI Express graphics card you want. They have 3 different types. The VI Dock 3 Vanilla will provide up to 75 watts directly over the PCI Express bus and can handle half-size PCI Express cards. The VI Dock 4 and the 4 Plus are respectively 150 watts of power with a single 6-pin connector, and the Plus with a second 6-pin connector for up to 225 watts. Okay. And both of those will accept full-sized cards, also double-height cards. So, hey, it's a nice idea. You just slide it in there and away you go. And you connect it up to an Express card slot on a laptop.
Why is that bad?
Well, I'm sort of thinking that, Express card has been around for a while, and, the newest thing they sort of have is that it runs in a PCI Express mode, in which case it's essentially acting as a single PCI Express 1.0 lane, aka 2.5 gigabits. I don't know the last time I saw a 1X PCI Express 1 graphics card being sold. And I'm pretty sure there's a reason
I did see one, but it was like a 4000 series. 43 something. Yeah.
I think depending on the game, though, your delay might just be on launch or like on texture loading, that kind of thing. I mean, beyond that, do you really need much more than a 1X link when it's just sending, paint this here, paint that there instructions to the card?
Depends on how much texture swapping it has to do and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially considering they're billing it as multi-monitor support, and because you're now allowed to use the XS ports on the back of the video card to send signal. So, you plug in the laptop and away you go.
Texture, caching and getting it from thing. I mean, there's a lot of data being pushed to these GPUs right now in terms of instructions and geometry type crap and all of that. It's just there's a lot more to 3D setup than just, well, there's a pixel there, paint it. So it's kind of,
you might not notice much of a difference.
What was the bandwidth on that ATI external funky thing we looked at CES a couple of years back? Ryan, you remember that?
Well, I have no idea. But it was a custom technology. Like, it was a custom connector and technology. It like wasn't cross compatible with anything. So I couldn't tell you what the bandwidth was on that.
So essentially, that's what you've got is a card that, if you're playing WoW, yeah, it might actually work, but then again, so will the graphics inside of your machine. But I did some snooping around because, the assumption is, hey, there are better things out there. There's an ExpressPard 2.0, single lane PCI Express 2.0. Doubles it, 5 gigabits a second. Okay, we're looking a little bit better. Except looking around, which laptops are there around that support ExpressCard 2? Good luck with that. There are very, very few and far between. However, 5 gigabits a second. Wait a second. We've been hearing a lot about that from a different set of guys. USB 3.0. They also offer it. So maybe, there's an adapter that exists. So I can take a USB 3.0 port. Very common. And with an adapter, turn that into a DisplayPort connection. So, if they do turn out with an ExpressPort 2 version, hey, maybe we can double the bandwidth, sort of get things easy. And no, they don't exist. But what exists is an ExpressCard 1.0 to USB 3.0 with 2 connectors. Or dual 5 gigabits over a single 2.5 gigabits. Math sort of against this. I can understand 480 meg or 0.48 is USB 2.0. So, yeah, okay, it's going to be better than a USB 2.0 plug, but seriously? And you're selling two? Like, why not make a single one? At least it's got everything it wants. Okay, browsing around, looking around a little bit more. Come on, there's got to be something. Because we all want an external video card at some point. You can cart around your laptop, you get home, you don't want the dock, you just want one little plug-in, and boom, your monitors fire up, you've got all the extra graphical power, your keyboard and mouse are all hooked up. It's a dock plus. So Lightpeak. Well, Thunderbolt, sort of copper version that they sort of did. Right. Well, okay, so what have we got there? Well, and there is supposedly a model coming out for that, Apple product that sports this connector currently. Problem being, they don't play games so much. Okay, so now you're doubling your bandwidth again. We're up to 10 gigabits. We're at a 2x PCI Express 2.0. Again, this is hard to say, and I haven't seen it against Llano. I have a sinking suspicion that Llano is actually going to probably perform just about parallel with this. If you buy the spend the extra money in a laptop to actually get a decent mobile GPU, you're going to blow it away because you're either doing 8x or 16x PCI Express 2.0, so you're at 64 gigabits, 64 gigabits. That's sort of the place that you have to approach for this to actually be interesting, which means now you're waiting 4 or 5 years down the road until hopefully Copper Peak becomes Light Peak again, so that light is actually involved, and you'll see something that is actually even going to be rivaling PCI Express 3.0. But until we see a proper implementation of Light Peak, and it starts actually producing the speeds which we've been promised, I just don't see an external GPU being usable.
I think that there are definitely technical limitations. Otherwise, we would have some kind of standard by now, or some kind of usable option on the market. As many options as we've seen kind of come and go, it kind of leads me to believe that this one will likely do the same. I think it's like this holy grail that doesn't really exist for mobile gaming. The idea of having this external box that you can come home, plug your laptop in, and get 5 displays and hardcore gaming is still, I think, a worthwhile goal. I just don't know how easily attainable we are there yet. Let's see. Some other interesting GPU news, I guess. NVIDIA outlining multi-GPU and cloud graphics with a Project Maximus. They like these names. Project Denver. Now I've got Project Maximus with virtual graphics technologies. Josh, what do you know about what NVIDIA has been talking about at the SIGGRAPH 2011 show?
Well, I read some of the stuff. And what it kind of sounds like to me, and I kind of thought about it more today at work, and it kind of hit upon me about what exactly they're kind of aiming at. So they've got two things here. One, they've got a bunch of Fermi cards out on the cloud. You send data to and kind of connect to it. It sends you back the results. So
Good.
You're on a laptop. You need to do some CAD/CAM stuff that's actually, you actually utilizes 3D and anything else like that. And I'm lisping. Anyway. So you need all this graphical horsepower, but you only need it for a couple percent of the time. Why spend all of this incredible amount of money on a laptop that has a Quadro special chip in there? It's not going to be all that fast when you kind of plug into the internet and have access to this cloud computing. And so that was kind of one of the ideas. But the better idea that I thought of, and this is going to go hand in hand with, is say you're a small engineering firm. You've got a handful of CAD users. Why spend, $2,000, for each of those computers, or multiple of cards in there if they're doing this actual true 3D rendering in these professional applications, and you can put a couple of them in like a server. They just have a standard little card in there that doesn't create much heat. Does the majority of the stuff that they need all the time, and that only 5% of the day where they actually need the horsepower to do the kind of renderings that they usually do in an engineering environment. It connects them to this server that has these two cards. So instead of having 10 CAD users and you're paying $2,000 a piece for them to have, and you're spending $20,000 on these cards, well, you buy two of them, put them in a server, and have those guys connect to it. So it's a lot more efficient because they're being utilized at a higher rate, and also you're spending less in the meantime with each of your users, but they still have the benefits of these top-end professional cards that they have easy access to. So this is really a neat idea. I mean, in the end, it may cost NVIDIA a little bit of money, probably in the short term, because they're not selling as many cards. But
right.
If this takes off and more people say, hey, this is a good idea, this is something we can actually afford, and if we utilize this, we may have a higher efficiency and productivity of our CAD guys, because they have access to this higher level hardware that can do faster stuff, and they can spit out the results much faster. But we've got a bunch of these guys in the office that will do that every once in a while. So overall, we're going to have greater productivity. We can more, effectively justify the purchase of these cards, and it's a good way to share them around. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but in the 50s, 60s and 70s, we had the big iron and then all the microcomputers. 80s turned to the PC. 90s did, these large network environments. That goes through the 2000s. And now we're starting to look at more towards consolidating and virtualizing all of this hardware again into one spot. So we're kind of going back to big iron with these, very, very simple basic workstations, connecting into something that is a lot more robust. And NVIDIA is certainly writing that kind of idea, and certainly AMD has not said anything about this or has put anything in. I mean, what they want to do is sell you Bulldozer and Trinity down the line.
Sure.
So it's kind of interesting to see NVIDIA taking a different route here, and this is something that if they do it well, if they could really carve out a nice niche for themselves with a lot of different companies that will utilize the power of these high-end cards.
So do you think they're aiming this stuff at like thin client, sort of like a workspace where everybody's seat has just, the little thin client box and it has some kind of cluster off on the side, and they're just trying to work that into that so you can have the better graphics capability?
It could very well be part of that. They've got a very basic graphics processor in this client machine. And whenever it needs to do the heavy lifting, goes through the network, accesses these, 2, 3, or 4, heavy-duty cards, and they still get the same amount of performance as if they had those cards in their machine, or at least close enough that it doesn't matter.
And I can totally see them pairing up with like VMware or another one of the virtual server companies.
Exactly.
So that you can assign stream processors, on a per client basis, more or less.
Yep.
Which could be utterly brilliant if they do it.
Yeah, that is a big win if they can pull that off, because then you'll see it won't just be like a consideration sort of thing. It'll just be that's just the next step, because people that are doing thin client-based kind of workspaces now, there is no graphics acceleration. That's just not doable. You just can't do that kind of thing. You have to have some kind of workstation machine and make considerations for that. And you see like the really modern workspaces now that are meant to be just an office type environment where people are mostly doing word processing or just kind of sit down kind of work. They don't have the PC at your desk anymore, right? It's just this thin client thing. Everything's all in a cluster somewhere else.
So you're trying to tell me, all of you are telling me that you're going to buy OnLive devices if you're gaming.
It's not OnLive.
No, it's got nothing to do with OnLive.
It's not OnLive.
Totally different implementation. No, This is when you're at work. So it's kind of hard to get the OnLive client onto the machine, especially, when it's a thin client. You don't actually have anything more than a little bit of flash memory. You don't have write privileges to. But I mean, and as the chat just mentioned...
Well, this is, much more of a focused idea that OnLive essentially started when they first had the product out. This distributed computing that, is out there. But of course, when you're playing a game on live, you're using that graphics processor at their servers all the time. This is, just an efficiency measure in both terms of monetary output as well as how much you're actually utilizing this hardware during a day. And I think it's really, really clever.
Yeah, and this is more of like the rendering sort of stuff. Right. So the rendering itself will take place there, but like the actual painting, it just takes place. You're like basically splitting it in two, right? Like the OnLive stuff is rendering the frame completely and it's passing it over a network and has to recompress it and all this other stuff. Whereas this stuff would be like whatever the thin client or whatever's on the user side is going to actually get like a minimalist amount of info back. Basically the stuff that had all the big number crunching had already happened elsewhere. And then that stream goes back to, whatever the really low footprint kind of thing that doesn't make a lot of heat at all. That sits, under the desk, that sort of thing. Yeah. That's a completely different concept entirely. But, and you don't have to worry about the latency kind of thing. You're in the building with the gear, right? You're
talking about switch.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
And then the other thing that I've never seen except outside of PR that, I take with at least a half pound of salt, is that they can emulate x86 processors on these things. That would be even niftier for NVIDIA. They don't even have to invent an x86 processor. They just provide the raw power. Somebody else provides the software emulation of the architecture to push it along.
This is the equivalent of having the Office Work Center copy/print station, except for graphics.
Rendering station, so to speak.
Yes.
Very cool. One more bit of news before we get into our picks of the week and move on to end the episode. This is something that just crossed the wire about 45 minutes ago as we record this. This is Intel betting $300 million on the idea of the Ultrabook. To read from the post that Scott put together, we all remember at Computex, I guess, that they kind of announced the Ultrabook platform. And then I guess it was just last week last week, Jeremy did a news post on the Achilles heel of the Ultrabook platform being the price, and that the bill of materials manufacturers were kind of claiming was in the $700 to $1,000 range, which makes it very difficult to compete with a product like the MacBook Air, which is in that $1,000 price range as well. Even though Intel itself puts the cost of parts between $475 and $710, the actual partners kind of come out and said that it's much higher than that currently. So to further push the Ultrabook platform, Intel released a statement announcing $300 million fund to invest in technologies that further the Ultrabook platform. So what's interesting about this is we're talking about hardware and software improvements, right? I think Scott equates the $300 million is not exactly huge in the scale of Intel revenue. It is a substantial sum and equal to what they used back in the Centrino days over 8 years ago. While the last investment went to subsidizing wireless access points, marketing, and similar programs, this investment should mostly be focused on the technology itself, hardware and software, with battery, input, and interface specifically mentioned in the press release. So the idea here, the hope is that Intel is investing this $300 million to figure out how we can get a 20-hour battery with modest type of requirements and still getting good performance out of a machine. I know sounds
it's the equivalent of a leg breaker showing up and saying, they're saying they're expensive, these Ultrabooks. No, they're not expensive. You only pay half price. You pay full up front, but we give you money back after. Okay,
I don't know if this is going to hardware like manufacturers, OEMs, or if this is kind of going to be like one of those, can we give this to research and development firms and that kind of stuff to see who comes up with the best idea that then multiple companies can implement. They, focus on enhancing how people interact with Ultrabooks, such as through sensors and touch, achieving all-day usage through longer battery life, enabling innovative physical design, and improved storage capacity. The overall goal of the fund, which will be invested over the next 3 to 4 years, is to create a cycle of innovation and system capabilities for this new and growing category of mobile devices. I don't think $300 million is enough to subsidize Ultrabooks in that type of fashion, especially when you realize when they're saying they're going to expand this over 3 to 4 years. Now, the next iteration of Intel's processor, is that Haswell? Is that something else?
Yeah.
Ivy Bridge?
Haswell.
And then Haswell? So Haswell's like 2013,
Is there
I
something
guess?
in between that? No, it's just Ivy Bridge and then Haswell.
So I think what we'll see the majority of this is kind of show up in that Haswell timeframe. I'm still hopeful that we'll see something like the Asus the UX01, that really nice looking kind of chrome finish, UX21 that we saw at Computex, that's very MacBook Air looking, that I hope that it actually exists. I hope that it actually runs, gets a good 7, 8, 10 hours of battery life, and will be for sale for less than $2,500, because that's what it's going to take to really kind of show that the PC can stand on the same ground as the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air in terms of design, as well as performance, right? We know the PC tends to be better cost per dollar or performance per dollar, but in the design standpoint, I think it's very hard to argue with Apple's goals there. So it'll be interesting to see what Intel does with this money. They basically just made the announcement that they've created the fund, so hopefully we'll see some results from it maybe by the end of this year. No promises, but if you want to read the full press release and kind of digest what Intel has said themselves, go to PCPro.com. It is the first thing on the webpage as of this recording. So,
and maybe, it's too bad they didn't send you $600 of processors out of this fund to support.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
At the Hardware Workshop, not a single processor manufacturer was seen. Intel did not donate processors. AMD did not donate processors. The CPUs we used in our system build contest, I actually had to go out and buy. So that was unexpected, but what are you going to do in the long run of things, right? Some things aren't worth starting fights about at this time. Let's get into our hardware software picks of the week. I'm going to start with an interesting selection, something that we just got in on Monday. It is from a company called Black Magic Design. They have a whole bunch of products typically used for video capture, video input, these types of things. The lowest cost option and kind of the most prosumer-based device is called the Intensity. They have two models. The Intensity Pro is a PCI Express by one card that fits obviously just inside an internal PC. Then there's the Intensity Shuttle, which is an external USB 3.0 device that's kind of just now kind of being released. We are using the internal PCI Express model, doing HDMI output from cameras, like the camera that we are using to record this podcast today, although we didn't get the HDMI kind of configurations up and running yet, directly into a computer. What's interesting about that is that it provides you the option to acquire fully uncompressed HD signals, fully uncompressed 1080p signals. And to put that in perspective, there's two ways you can record video through this hardware solution. It's uncompressed, or you can use their compressed version called Motion JPEG, which actually does pretty well. And I think 1 minute of motion JPEG is about 40 megabytes or something like that. And then we did 1 minute recording raw to the hard drive. And it was actually, I think it was a little bit less than a minute. And it was almost 7 gigabytes worth of data. So if we were recording to a 240 gig SSD. So in that regard, you can't record for very long at 7 gigabytes per minute. But it's impressive for it to be able to handle this much data through that controller, through the different FPGAs on there, down into your system, 7 gigabytes a minute. If you are a kind of like a video purist and you want to get, this is coming out of a 5-year-old Canon HV30. We even got some video off of our Canon 7D. This way, pure, raw, uncompressed data on there. It's like basically raw photos on your camera that you're kind of used to, that same type of data in video format. So if you know how big those files can get on your snapshot camera, imagine what it would be like in a video form. But this hardware is able to handle it pretty well, and it worked almost flawlessly, kind of right out of the box type of thing. So we're hoping to use this technology to do some more interesting video production stuff on our end, maybe some more live broadcasts, maybe some 2 time a week type short video segments type of thing with multiple cameras and that type of deal. This is kind of all stemmed from our preparation for live QuakeCon coverage. So hopefully we'll see some more stuff out of that in the not too distant future. Price $189 on Amazon. So not stupid expensive, and you can install as many of these as you have PCI Express slots in your system. Jeremy, you like something from Bigfoot Networks?
I am as shocked as you are. Because, it's not that we've been making fun of Bigfoot and the Killer Nick for years now.
Ever?
No, never. Not even once. Not even when they, got integrated onto motherboards and suddenly you could have a gigabit Ethernet port from whoever and a Killer Nick. And,
Right.
Unless you really, really had to download that BitTorrent and play Counter-Strike at the same time, it was really hard to justify buying it. They just put out a wireless card. Now, wireless networking is something that, they've pumped it up to N. It's not officially N, but it's essentially officially N. But, there's been a lot of stagnation. There's nothing new coming out of wireless. And so these guys jumped on, essentially slapped on the exact same type of optimization software that they did with the wired one.
Okay.
Made currently the Killer N1102 wireless is a 2x2x2. I don't know exactly how you say the MIMO, but essentially 2 transmit, 2 receive, and 2 streams simultaneously. They've just put out a 3x3x3 one as well. So if you actually got a halfway decent wireless router, you actually see the improvements that Bigfoot has been promising from day one. Because at day one, they were claiming, everything drops to this, and we've written this benchmark software software, and if you run it, it shows that our card is so much better than everyone else's, and it's not just because we wrote the software; it's because it's real. And actually, it turns out, an Antec, once they figured out how to benchmark wireless cards, because if someone's microwaving 3 blocks down, that can affect it, so it'll make it. But no, they were actually seeing solid performance increases. In some cases, actually, latency almost as low as wired. Transfer speeds, no, not quite. But, for latency and just for pure usage, especially when, something's occluding the signal a little bit, from what I saw from their review, this thing actually does what Killer Nick has been promising to do from the start. So, if you're looking at a new laptop, and if the added price is sort of like the motherboards, where you're looking at $10 or $15 extra for an extra connection and the extra controller from Bigfoot,
Right.
Might actually be worth picking it up for your notebook. From the looks of it, it might actually be, and I can't believe I'm saying it, but their killer app.
So for wired stuff, you had a lot of development coming from like the enterprise that just sort of carried over to desktop, right? Like, some company, Intel, whoever, make a really good performing gigabit Ethernet solution, and then it would trickle down to desktop. So Killer Nick, all that stuff, we were making fun of it for desktop stuff because they were trying to improve on something. There was not really any room to improve.
Mm-hmm,
right?
exactly.
It was already, the latencies were already really tiny. It was just, everything's already too good for improvement. Wireless has only been consumer, right? You don't see enterprise grade wireless speed. This doesn't happen, right? So all those optimizations that you would get in like the enterprise kind of environment didn't happen for that. So these guys did that. They saw it and they improved it. So yeah, they finally found their niche.
Cool.
It only took them like 5 years.
Josh, what have you got for us?
Originally I was going to say buy cheap memory because we're at peak memory right now. It looks like you can get 2x4 gig kits for like $48. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But instead, because I've constantly been harping and banging on memory for the past 6 months because the prices have continually gone down, I'm doing a little something different. Faststone. They're doing some nice freeware. They have a photo resizer that I just used recently because an engineer at the other place that I work, we don't have a huge amount of server space. He was taking like 12 megapixel pictures of these project sites that he maybe needed 1 megapixel at most. So instead of having him go out there and do that, or me sitting down at Photoshop and resizing things, I decided to look for a good batch resizer, and I found this stuff from Faststone. I put all the stuff in there. I set the settings to where I wanted to go, how wide, how tall, what kind of compression we're looking at, how good, how bad, and boy, that stuff works like a charm.
Nice.
It resized the stuff really nicely. I didn't see any strange artifacts. It used as many cores as I had. It was just a nice little product for free. So it's free for home. They ask you to kind of donate for business. So we're probably going to be doing that because I have a lot of space on our servers to clear up, and we have a bunch of engineers who have no idea how to lower the megapixels on cameras that we have in the office. Even though I've set them down to the lowest levels, they somehow get them jacked back up.
Not a problem. Engineers. Yeah. Alan, you have 2 selections for us this week?
I do. One is a website that has been around for a long freaking time, but I only just recently discovered it. So you have like, Screencast and all these other, like Ryan, that's the one you use, right? To take a screenshot and get it out there real fast.
Yes. Through Jing. Jing is kind of the capturing, but it uses Screencast as the photo sharing thing, I believe.
Right. So there's solutions like that just to get that kind of thing out there real fast. What if you got a piece of code or something, or just some text you want to just get out there, and you don't necessarily want to do email. You just want it to be something you can just paste a link and a bunch of people can see, right? You don't want to worry about like a Google Doc trying to share that out or anything. You just want a link.
Yes.
Right. Yep. So pastebin.com, all one word. It's just, you go there, you paste some text into the box, you give it a unique link name, or it can just give you like a random one, and it even does like a text, I don't want to say overlay, but like a syntax highlighting specific to different types of code. So It's got, just like every kind of possible language in that list. So basically you just throw your text in there or your code, whatever it may be. It'll do the funky highlighting kind of so it looks snazzy to the people that are viewing it on the other side, and it gives you the link, and you can even set like an expiration after like a week, a day, an hour, or whatever, so that it'll just go away. It won't be out there in the wild forever, and that's it. You give the person the link, and it sends them right to the page. It's that simple, just like the screencast thing or the that sort of thing, but except for text and code. So that's kind of cool. And
now I'm getting a recommendation that we also point people to privatepaste.com. was another
I haven't-
option that does
I
the
haven't
same
seen that
thing.
one, but okay, cool.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's a couple of them for that. If you have that,
I've
kind
never
of a-
seen anything like this before, so I'm going to try out both of those.
Yeah,
Well, it's
and
great for
neither had
passing
I.
code
And
back
then
and forth.
once somebody tried to pay something quick to me, and they just sent me that link, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And then once I saw it, I was like, "Man, there must have been, many occasions where I could have used something like this, and I end up having to email it or something." My other pick here is a browser plugin that works on every dang browser out there, basically. It's a thing called Ghostery, which is pretty cool. I actually heard about it on one of the other Twit Network shows a week or two ago. Cool little tool. What it does is it shows you all the browser bug tracker kind of things that are on whatever the given pages that you're looking at. So you go to the page, it throws a little box in the upper right, like it sort of fades in, stays there for a few seconds, then fades out, and it gives you the option to block them. Like you can just just block them if you want, but I don't recommend that. What I do recommend is use this and just get the feel for the kind of stuff, the kind of trackers that are being used. And if you see ones that you don't like, you can selectively block them. So, like the silly Facebook, what's the one? Facebook Connect. Like if you never use the Facebook Connect thing, you don't even want Facebook knowing that you went to that page, because they do know, right? Like if you go to a page and it has the Facebook link thing from that website into Facebook, that tips them off just from the fact that you went to that page. You don't even have to hit like or anything. They know, right? So if you don't want that in particular to happen, you can block that. And then all the other stuff still, Google Analytics, the other stuff that's actually useful to whoever owns the website. Like, for example, what impressed me with our own website, I mean, not to go too much on ourselves, but we're not crazy about that stuff, right? Ryan, you only use like the bare minimum type of just the stuff you need to be able to track traffic coming to your site.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been to other sites where this thing is, we only have like 5 or 6 different kinds of, things up there, which is like the normal ones. But then you go to websites where you see like DoubleClick and like all these other, huge string of things pop up there. Then you can, you sort of get a feel for how intrusive or how annoying that given website, is. So it's sort of like a smarter browsing kind of thing.
As a website owner, there's nothing that pisses me off more than ad blocker. And
Right.
If this allows people to selectively go through that stuff and hopefully still leave advertisements on sites that they like and support like ours, then that's great. I remember when we first did our redesign and we got like the screenshots in from, hey, you've got some stuff, you got these big holes in your website, and they'd send me a screenshot. It's like, well, that's where the ad is supposed to be, asshole. So these types of things I'm for, right? I mean, I like to use these types of things too. So
Yeah, and this is specifically not an ad blocker. It's really it's to block specific kinds of tracking.
right.
Okay, so if you're concerned about that stuff, but you don't want to shut it all off, this does the selective thing. It's good.
Very cool. All right,
Yeah.
that is going to wrap up the show for this week. PCPer.com/podcast is the URL to share. Again, Twitter.com/PCPer is live, ready for you to follow. Go there and keep track of all the stuff that we do sometimes. Send us an email, please, podcast@PCPer.com. If you have any comments about the workshop or anything like that, if you were there, if you were at QuakeCon, if you were, you watched live, if you have any ideas or thoughts on it, we'll kind of do a little bit more post-mortem on that. If people have comments they want to share with us there too, that would be awesome. And of course, 1-888-38-PC-PER is the toll-free telephone number, U.S. and Canada. So with that, we'll end the show. We'll see you next week, guys. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Aventano.
Thanks for listening.